For the professional wrestler, see Jimmy Olsen. James Bartholomew Jimmy Olsen is a fictional character who appears mainly in DC Comics unregistered trademark Superman stories. Olsen is a young photojournalist working for the Daily Planet. He is close friends with Lois Lane and Clark Kent Superman, and has a good working relationship with his boss Perry White. Olsen looks up to his co-workers as role models and parent figures. Fictional character profile: Jimmy is traditionally depicted as a bow-tie-wearing, red-haired young man who works as a cub reporter and photographer for the Daily Planet, alongside Lois Lane and Clark Kent, whom he idolizes as career role models. In most depictions of the character, he has a strong friendship with Superman. As Superman's friend, Jimmy has special access to the Man of Steel, thanks to Superman's gift to Jimmy of a signal watch, a wristwatch which, with the press of a button, emits a special ultrasonic frequency signal that Superman can hear anywhere on Earth. In many Silver Age of comic books, Jimmy was often seen sharing adventures with Superman, who saved him from various predicaments ranging from dangerous to merely embarrassing. This was particularly pronounced in the series Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, published from 1954 to 1974, which saw Olsen in a variety of slapstick adventures and strange transformations. Like most DC characters, modern portrayals of Olsen have been more serious in tone. An important part of the Superman mythos, Jimmy Olsen has appeared in most other media adaptations of the character. Publication history: an unnamed office boy with a bow tie makes a brief appearance in the story Superman's Phony Manager, published in Action Comics number 6, which is claimed to be Jimmy Olsen's first appearance by several reference sources. The character was first introduced as Jimmy Olsen in the radio show The Adventures of Superman on April 15, 1940, mainly so the Man of Steel would have someone to talk to. With Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster creating and drawing the physical appearance and giving him a bigger personality, the character moved from the radio show back into the comics in 1941, first appearing as a named character in the story Superman vs. the Archer in Superman number 13. But after a handful of appearances, he disappeared again. In late 1953, while Jack Larson was playing the character on the Adventures of Superman television show where he was referred to as Jim Olsen, the character was revived in the Superman comics after a 10-year absence and then given his own title. In addition to Larson, he was portrayed by Tommy Bond in the two Superman film serials, Superman and Atom Man vs. Superman. Mark McClure in the Superman films of the 1970s and 1980s, as well as the 1984 film Supergirl. Michael Lands in the first season of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and Justin Hallin in the subsequent 3 seasons. Sam Huntington in the 2006 film Superman Returns. And Aaron Ashmore in the CW Smallville. Silver Age equals. During the Silver Age, beginning in 1954, Jimmy starred in his own comic book, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, which featured his various adventures with and without Superman. The stories in the title would often feature particularly outlandish situations, ranging from Jimmy being hurled back in time to Krypton before its destruction in issue number 36 to dealing frequently with gorillas of all sorts. This version of Jimmy Olsen even had his own fan club. Jack Kirby's Fourth World. Jack Kirby began by introducing a secret DNA project to create mutated humans for good, adding the Harries, super beings from other planets, Intergang, and Morgan Edge. And reintroduced his 1940s Newsboy Legion characters. About halfway through his run, Kirby introduced vampires, the Loch Ness Monster, and Victor Volcanum, the fire-eating arch-criminal. Readership quickly dropped back to its pre-Kirby levels. Kirby's tenure on the series ended with issue number 148. And with issue number 164, Jimmy's book was folded into the anthology titled The Superman Family. In that series, Olsen became a more serious character who battled criminals as an investigative reporter known as Mr. Action in urban crime stories that rarely involved Superman. Jimmy Olsen appeared in new stories in the Superman Family number 164, 167, 170, 173, 176, 179, and 182 to 222. Modern Adventures The Man of Steel. Following Crisis on Infinite Earths, the entire Superman mythos was rebooted from scratch in the limited series The Man of Steel. Despite recent modernization efforts on Superman and his supporting characters, Jimmy Olsen has not been significantly changed in the modern age. He is still a cub reporter working for the Daily Planet, and is still friends with Superman. His look was made over as he stopped wearing boaties, and started wearing casual clothing. An interesting alteration to the relationship was that Jimmy designed the Signal Watch himself, leading to his first meeting with Superman. Superman briefly considered confiscating the watch, but decided he trusted Jimmy to use it responsibly. While Jimmy's transformations no longer occur as regularly as they did in the Silver Age, Jimmy did become Elastic Lad on contact with the Eradicator. He has taken the identity of Turtle Boy in a series of pizza commercials, made when he was temporarily laid off from the planet. In the 1990s, Jimmy moved to Metropolis broadcaster Galaxy Broadcasting, where he became more brash and arrogant. This came to an end when he thought he had discovered Superman's secret identity and said he would announce it live on air. He reconsidered his actions, but lost his job for wasting the time slot. He was again rehired by the planet. Jimmy later came under the angry hand of the Alpha Centurion, an alternate universe dictator with a deep-seated hatred for Superman and an eye toward Lois Lane. It was Jimmy who first uncovered his secret plot to control the world's finances through his company Alias Industries, Incorporated. Superman, Metropolis, June 2003 saw Jimmy Olsen as the focus of a 12-part miniseries entitled Superman, Metropolis. Written by Chuck Austin and illustrated by Dana Zelzelj, the series focused on the futuristic technology unleashed in Metropolis by Brainiac in a previous storyline, and how it affected the everyday lives of Metropolis citizens. Recently, Jimmy had taken a position as a regular star reporter for the Daily Planet, replacing the recently demoted Clark Kent. This caused a strain in the Daily Planet. Countdown. Jimmy's story in the 2007-08 weekly series Countdown to Final Crisis begins with an investigation into the death of Duela Dent. Tying into the death of the New God storyline, Jimmy starts to develop a plethora of new superpowers, which he first discovers when he is attacked by Killer Croc while gathering information on Duela's death. As the story progresses, he tries to uncover the origin of these powers and starts to discover their potential limitlessness in stories which mimic the Silver Age Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen adventures. Briefly operating as the superhero Mr. Action, Jimmy is unable to command the respect of established superheroes in the Justice League and Teen Titans, and gives up on this particular avenue. One of these powers allows Jimmy to realize the identities of some superheroes, such as Robin and Superman, who requests that he take care of Krypto. Jimmy is eventually tracked down by the New God Forager, with whom he begins a romantic relationship. Forager informs him that he has become a soul catcher for the spirits of dying New Gods. The Monitor known as Solomon later tells him that his new powers are the consequence of Darkseid using Jimmy as a host for powers he wishes to use to recreate the universe in his image, knowing that Superman's pal is one of the world's most well-protected citizens. Later, as the events of Countdown begin to come to their close, Jimmy becomes a more confidently powerful character and is reunited with the series' other cast members on a mission to stop Karate Kid's disease from becoming a pandemic of apocalyptic proportions. Unfortunately, they fail, and the Mortococcus virus devastates an alternate Earth. Upon return to their Earth, Jimmy is captured by Mary Marvel, who had been manipulated towards evil by Darkseid. When Superman comes to save Jimmy, Darkseid takes control of the powers within him, causing Jimmy to radiate kryptonite radiation, until Ray Palmer manages to rewire Darkseid's control from inside of Jimmy. Jimmy then transforms into a giant turtle-like creature, and prepares to take on Darkseid himself. Darkseid overcomes Jimmy, and prepares to kill him. Ray Palmer then comes out of Jimmy with the New God Soul Battery, and destroys it, returning Jimmy to normal. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen Special. During Superman's fight with Atlas, Jimmy witnesses a mysterious figure hovering over the fight. After some encouraging words from Clark Kent, he decides to take 2 weeks off to investigate. He tracks down a figure connected with the past of Jonathan Drew and is told the story of how Jonathan became codename Assassin. His informant is quickly executed by codename Assassin, who then tries to kill Jimmy. Jimmy is able to avoid being killed and is apparently shielded from codename Assassin's telepathy due to his own many physical transformations over the years. Jimmy goes to Project Cadmus and speaks to Double X, who tells him the story about the death of the original Guardian at the hands of codename Assassin and how cloning is such an imperfect science that the only viable clone alive went into hiding in the desert. Double X then dies from injuries sustained in an earlier conflict with codename Assassin. Jimmy heads south to the town of Warpath, AZ, managing to avoid conflict with codename Assassin on the way. Upon arriving in Warpath, Jimmy interviews the sheriff, Greg Saunders, who evades his questions. Jimmy follows him after dark and sees Saunders working with the last Guardian clone. He then confronts the clone at his home and the two speak. With his 2 weeks up, Jimmy returns to Metropolis horrified from learning that a faction within the U.S. military is actively plotting to kill Superman. Willing to do anything to uncover the conspiracy behind Project 7734, Jimmy uses an anonymous chat server and gets in contact with Eric, Amazing Woman from Infinity Incorporated, who claims to have information useful to help Jimmy. Despite being actively pursued by codename Assassin, who goes so far to place bugs in his house, Jimmy goes to the appointment, only to find Eric's house burned to the ground. Jimmy pulls Eric out, who with his dying breath, shifts to his more reliable and powerful Erica form. Eric gives him Natasha Irons' number. Natasha contacts then Jimmy, telling him about the plans of General Sam Lane, his outworldly fortress and his capture, and use of a planet-breaker weapon of Captain Atom, now codenamed Project Breach. Finally ready to uncover the truth, Jimmy is openly confronted by codename Assassin, who until that point had merely followed him closely. Jimmy uses his signal watch to call Mon-El. Jimmy is shot twice in the chest by codename Assassin, and sinks into the ocean. Despite surviving his assassination attempt, Jimmy decides to fake his death, having his documents planted on a heavily disfigured corpse. With no one knowing about his survival, Jimmy moves into the old Pemberton camera factory, sharing the results of his now unhindered investigations with Perry and Mon-El. Action Comics backup and Jimmy Olsen. DC Comics has reported in solicits that Nick Spencer and R.B. Silver will be producing a monthly 10-page backup feature in Action Comics chronicling the adventures of Jimmy Olsen in Metropolis. Reported story topics include an alien civilization choosing Metropolis as the base of a major cultural celebration, and the introduction of Chloe Sullivan to the DCU proper. In the latest arc, he goes on a charity date with a girl named Maggie, only to discover that she somehow has ties to Mr. MXYZPTLK, and that she wants to marry him. The last 3 chapters of the story are told in the self-titled one-shot, Jimmy Olsen. Powers, abilities, and equipment. Jimmy possesses a watch which emits a high-pitched signal only Superman can hear. In a 2010 story, he claimed it stopped working sometime in the past, never worked particularly well in the first place, and contacted Superman through Morse code now, anyway, but still wore it for show. Mostly during the Silver Age of comic books, Jimmy would find himself temporarily transformed, for better or worse, or undergo a disguise for various purposes. The variety of transformations Jimmy received during the Silver Age is often homaged or parodied in later comics and adaptations featuring the character for instance, in JLA, The Nail, Jimmy cites 3 of these transformations as his motivations behind backing Luthor's bill to outlaw metahumans, and in Countdown, Jimmy is used as a spirit container for the deceased New Gods, causing him to exhibit strange powers, albeit uncontrollably, with other stories simply make passing references. Speed Demon. In 1956, a month before the debut of Barry Allen as the new Flash, Jimmy drank a potion produced by a Professor Claude and briefly gained super speed. Radioactive. After being exposed to a radioactive substance, Jimmy began to irradiate everything in his presence. Super Brain. Jimmy briefly evolved into a man of the future with superhuman mental powers. Monstrous beard growth. The machinations of the sinister beard band caused Jimmy to grow an immense beard. Gorilla. When Jimmy switched minds with a gorilla, he went about his reporting duties as a gorilla in Jimmy's clothes. Elastic Lad. As Elastic Lad, Jimmy by serum or by alien virus could sometimes stretch himself, akin to elongated man or plastic man. As Elastic Lad, Jimmy was inducted as an honorary member of the Legion of Superheroes. In the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths continuity, Jimmy was afflicted with uncontrollable and painful elasticity by the Eradicator. It had to be genetically edited out. Alien form. Aliens transformed Jimmy into a telepathic Jovian for a week. Fortunately, this turned out to be a Jovian week, which is much shorter than an Earth week, about 70 hours equals slightly less than 3 days. Fire breather. An accident involving an experiment gives Jimmy fire breath. Human octopus. After eating an extraterrestrial fruit, Jimmy grew 4 extra arms. According to Superman, this was actually a hallucination, but Jimmy suspected that Superman said this to teach him a lesson since Jimmy had foolishly ignored advice from the Man of Steel that would have saved him a lot of trouble. Genie. Jimmy found a genie's lamp and was tricked into replacing its villainous occupant. Wolfman. In the vein of the 1957 Michael Landon film I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Jimmy found himself transformed into a werewolf. Woman. Jimmy would occasionally go undercover dressed as a woman in number 44, number 67, number 84, and number 159. Grant Morrison paid a brief homage to this in the JLA, Earth 2 graphic novel and in All-Star Superman. Morbidly obese, Jimmy tried to get fat in an attempt to stop a jewel smuggling and to impress a circus fat lady. Giant Turtle Man. One of Jimmy's most frequently cited transformations was that of his turning into a giant turtle man. Human Porcupine. After rejecting the romantic advances of an imp from the 5th dimension. Flamebird. This is the name he took as a costumed superhero, with Superman disguised as Nightwing, in the shrunken Kryptonian city of Kandor. These names were inspired by 2 native Kryptonian birds, the Nightwing and the Flamebird, but the relationship between Nightwing and Flamebird intentionally paralleled the crime-fighting team Batman and Robin. Bizarro Jimmy. Although Jimmy has a counterpart on Bizarro World, he was briefly turned into a Bizarro himself. Hippie. Investigating a colony of hippies at Guru Karma's dream pad, Jimmy grew a beard and participated in a mock hate-in. On the cover of this story's issue, Jimmy is wielding a sign that says Superman is a freak out. Viking. Jimmy put on Viking armor and mistakenly thought he'd been transported 1,000 years backward in time. Steelman. After a volcanic eruption hurls Jimmy and an experimental interdimensional travel device into an alternate universe, Jimmy develops his own superpowers as a result of the transit to the Earth X, but is vulnerable to fragments of Mount Tipton from his own universe. He adopts a fusion Superman-Batman outfit and launches his own superhero career as Steelman, facing a Joker-masked Clark Kent, secretly the leader of the Luthor League before his return to his own universe of origin. Other versions. JLA, The Nail equals. In JLA, The Nail, an alternate reality in which a nail punctured a tire on the Kent's car, preventing them from finding the spaceship containing a baby Kal-El, Jimmy Olsen is revealed as the one behind all the other superheroes' troubles. Jimmy had served as an aide to Lex Luthor, who has become the mayor of Metropolis thanks to his efforts to provide Metropolis with a technologically advanced police force to battle the threats that Superman was not there to defend the city against following various short-lived attempts at heroism caused by temporary alteration of his DNA, leaving him somewhat cynical of real heroes. Having discovered Superman's spaceship and using DNA samples to create numerous Bizarro clones, Luthor grafted Kryptonian DNA onto Jimmy, the only such graft that appeared successful, as other subjects either died instantly or mutated before death. This caused Jimmy to go insane, and possess superpowers similar to Superman's, as well as mentally transforming him into a Kryptonian determined to replace human life with Kryptonian life. Jimmy played up the public's fear of superheroes via propaganda, encouraging the possibility of them as alien invaders rather than the enhanced humans of the Justice Society, hoping to have them imprisoned so he could use their DNA as well in an attempt to create a stable template to create other new Kryptonians. When Jimmy attacked an Amish couple and their son during a battle with the Justice League which culminated in a desperate attempt by Batman and Green Lantern to stop him by supercharging Batman with his ring after Jimmy defeated the rest of the team, the couple was killed, but the son was revealed to be Superman. In this alternate reality, the Amish couple had raised Kal-El, and brought him up as a pacifist who was encouraged to ignore worldly affairs so that he could walk in righteousness, so he had never used his powers in conflict. Jimmy asked Superman to join him, claiming that they were virtually brothers as they shared the same DNA, but when Superman refused, the two battled. During the battle, Jimmy's body finally started to reject the Kryptonian DNA, causing him to disintegrate. His last, almost prophetic words were directed at Superman, "We should have been friends." The Justice League then asked Superman to join them, recognizing that his DNA had only given Jimmy an opportunity to vent his pre-existing frustrations rather than bringing out something that was not there before. Frank Miller's Batman In Frank Miller's 1986 graphic novel The Dark Knight Returns, an older Jimmy Olsen is featured as the writer of a Daily Planet article titled Truth to Power, recalling the Age of Heroes. In the 2001 sequel Batman, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, he appears on various TV shows, where he attempts to reveal that the current president is a holographic projection. His attempts to publicize the truth are halted by Lex Luthor as Metropolis is destroyed by Brain IAC. A young Jimmy Olsen makes an appearance in All-Star Batman and Robin, The Boy Wonder #6, helping Vicky Vale, who he appears to be attracted to, escape from a hospital and giving her files on Batman and the Flying Graysons. This incarnation is described as a cub reporter for the Gotham Gazette as opposed to his regular position at the Daily Planet and as Superman's pal. Superman, Red Son In Superman, Red Son, written by Mark Miller, Jimmy is depicted as an agent of the CIA, eventually becoming the director, and soon joins Dr. Lex Luthor in his presidential bid and becomes vice president. Superman, Kal In Superman, Kal, the Jamie Olsen of the Middle Ages is an early alchemist, working with blacksmith's apprentice Kal to forge a suit of armor for Baron Luthor using metal acquired from a silver egg that fell from the sky years ago. After Kal is killed in his final effort to slay Luthor, the story concludes with an epilogue where Jamie Olsen tells his apprentice, Merlin, of his friendship with Kal, noting that Kal's last action was to hide away his indestructible sword until it would be needed. All-Star Superman In Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman series, Jimmy shows up briefly in the Daily Planet offices in Argyle socks. This Jimmy seems to be a refined version of the Silver Age vintage, with a signal watch halfway between a McDonald's Happy Meal toy and haute couture. He is shown with something that may be a jetpack. Issue number 4 of the series focuses on Jimmy and his adventures as the one-day director of the DNA Project, a leftover from the Jack Kirby-era Jimmy Olsen series. This is apparently the latest in a series of highly successful articles by Jimmy, in which he spends a day in various roles. This version of Jimmy became that reality's version of Doomsday. Flashpoint In the alternate timeline of the Flashpoint event, Jimmy Olsen is an agent of Cyborg sent to spy on the Amazons. He was with Lois Lane reporting on a fashion show in Mount Mata when the Atlanteans flooded Europe. Jimmy was one of the thousands to perish in Western Europe when he tried to save an old man, though Lois survived by getting into a church steeple. Jimmy's place at the Resistance was then taken by Lois, after she got his camera, revealed to be a communications device that can transform into different forms for concealment. DC Universe Online, Legends In the limited comic series, DC Universe Online, Legends, Jimmy Olsen was captured, alongside Lois Lane and Perry White, in the Daily Planet by Brainiac, but was saved by Superman, with Lex Luthor in possession of the canister containing them. Later, Jimmy became one of the people who have gained metahuman abilities from Brainiac's exabytes, transforming his body into a large being with reptile-like skin. Superman Beyond taking place decades after Jimmy's final appearance in Justice League Unlimited, the Superman Beyond one-shot features a now elderly version of the character. It is revealed that Jimmy purchased the Daily Planet after Perry White's death, and now runs a successful media empire. Injustice, Gods Among Us Jimmy appears in the comic book prequel to Injustice, Gods Among Us, where he is killed by the Joker while on a stakeout with Lois, who was kidnapped by Joker soon after his death. Earth 2 Jimmy Olsen is a hyper-intelligent knowledge assimilator known as Accountable in the Earth 2 series. Parody homage, in Alan Moore and Gene Haas' Top 10, a photograph of a version of two of Jimmy's superpowered selves, merged, is shown to Andy Soames. Having contracted a disease which warps powers, this version appears to be Turtle Boy, driven insane by the acquisition of Elastic Lad's powers. In Lord Havoc and the Extremists No. 3, a variation of Jimmy called Robin Olsen, is shown as a member of Monarch's army. In Alan Moore's Supreme, Billy Friday is a young, red-haired associate of Ethan Crane's Supreme. Friday eventually merges with Master Meteor, a time-traveling villain powered by the reality-bending substance Supremium, and becomes the insane Supremium Man. In the 2010 film Megamind, a version of Jimmy Olsen named Hal Stewart is a cameraman working with TV reporter Roxanne Ritchie. He has unrequited feelings for Ritchie, which plays into and results in him becoming a villain named Titan later in the movie. In other media. Radio on the Superman radio series, Jack Elk and Jack Grimes portrayed Jimmy Olsen. Television Live action. Adventures of Superman on the Adventures of Superman television series, Jimmy Olsen was portrayed by Jack Larson, who appeared as the Cub reporter from 1952 to 1958. Largely because of the popularity of Larson and his portrayal of the character, National Comics Publications decided in 1954 to create Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, a regular title featuring Jimmy as the leading character. Decades later in 1996, Larson portrayed an unnaturally aged Jimmy Olsen in an episode of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman . On the television series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Jimmy Olsen was portrayed by Michael Lanz in the first season and Justin Hallin for the rest of the series run. The reason cited behind the change is that Lanz looked too much like Dean Cain as well as to emphasize Jimmy's youth. Lanz played Olsen as a cocksure, sarcastic Generation X character, who often seemed like he was very sure of himself, although usually, the opposite was true. Hallin gave a portrayal closer to previous incarnations of the character, playing Jimmy as a lovably naive rookie. When Hallin took over the role, more emphasis was placed on Jimmy's love life and he would frequently seek out Lois, Clark and Perry's advice on these matters. Hallin's Olsen was described as being a computer whiz, and these talents often came in useful to Lois and Clark's Superman, particularly in the episode Virtually Destroyed, where Jimmy's computing abilities come in handy as Lois and Superman battle a villain inside of a virtual reality simulator. Jimmy's home life and background is described in some detail throughout the course of the show. Although we never see her, some references are made to Jimmy's mother, who is described as being overweight and having allergies. Jimmy's father Jack Olsen is a James Bond-like secret agent for the fictional National Intelligence Agency, and the episode The Dad Who Came In From the Cold is entirely devoted to this character. Smallville In Smallville, the series incarnation of Jimmy Olsen is first referenced in Season 2 by Chloe Sullivan, when she refers to a cute boy she met in Metropolis that made her forget all about Smallville for the summer. His name is first given in Season 4 when Chloe says that he was her first time. In Season 6's premiere Zod, he appears in person on the staff of the Daily Planet and prefers to be called James. As Season 6 progresses, Jimmy and Chloe become a couple again. At first Jimmy is jealous of Clark Kent, but their relationship becomes friendly after Clark reunites him with Chloe in the Season 6 episode Trespass. In Season 7, Jimmy is still at Daily Planet working as a budding photographer, his relationship with Chloe is going through a rough phase due to Chloe's newfound abilities caused by an amount of kryptonite meteor in her bloodstream. They broke up in a very emotional scene in the episode Cures since Chloe was unable to share her secret with him. Meanwhile, Kara Zor-El has developed a crush on Jimmy and they become friends. Jimmy is smitten by her and teams up with her in episodes such as Cure and Lara. They are in a relationship briefly, but they break up and Jimmy is shown to be in a relationship again with Chloe in the episode Sleeper. In the season finale, he proposed to her but she was arrested before she had the time to answer. In Season 8's premiere Odyssey, Jimmy is seen waiting for Chloe at the Talon. Chloe arrives and Jimmy tells her that he takes back his proposal saying it might risk what they have between them. But Chloe disagrees. She reveals that she loves Jimmy and says that she'll gladly be his wife. She kisses Jimmy passionately afterwards. In Committed, Jimmy admits to Chloe that he lied about his father being a Manhattan investment banker. Jimmy says his father was an alcoholic and a mechanic in Oklahoma City and has never met his mother, apologizingly for lying but she hugs him. In Bride, Jimmy marries Chloe in the Kent barn but the reception is interrupted by Doomsday, who nearly kills Jimmy and kidnaps Chloe. Jimmy's condition is so serious he must be taken to a hospital in Star City. In Turbulence, Jimmy sees Davis Bloom murder a drunk driver and becomes almost violently obsessed with proving it. Davis convinces Chloe that Jimmy is hallucinating from high doses of pain medication, ultimately ending Chloe and Jimmy's marriage and causing Jimmy to become addicted to his pain medication. In Season 8's finale Doomsday, Chloe and Jimmy finally reconciled after Jimmy discovered Clark's secret and understood why Chloe had been with Davis to protect Clark from his Kryptonian alter ego, Doomsday. As Chloe gives Jimmy a passionate kiss, Jimmy is mortally wounded by a jealous Davis who was stripped of his Kryptonian persona by Clark and Chloe. Before succumbing to his injury, Jimmy kills Davis. At his funeral, his full name is revealed to be Henry James Olsen. His camera is given to his younger brother. While Jimmy's younger brother's name is not mentioned, the boy is wearing a boatie, leading to the possibility that this is Jimmy Olsen, who will befriend Superman. In Season 9 finale, Clark has a premonition about the future in 2013 where Lois Lane calls out to an Olsen, likely calling the younger Jimmy Olsen. In the Season 10 episode Homecoming, Clark accidentally time travels to the future in 2017 and reads a Daily Planet article that listed Jimmy Olsen. In the series finale, it verifies that the brother at Henry James' funeral is the real Jimmy Olsen, who is trying to follow his late brother's footsteps after being recruited as a news photographer at the Daily Planet. The young adult version of the character is also portrayed by Aaron Ashmore. The DVD box set for the 7th season of Smallville includes a featurette entitled Jimmy on Jimmy. Approximately 22 minutes in length, Jimmy on Jimmy is a roundtable discussion featuring 4 of the 6 surviving actors who have portrayed Jimmy Olsen in live action: Jack Larson, Mark McClure, Sam Huntington, and Aaron Ashmore. Michael Lanz and Justin Hallin did not participate. Supergirl James Olsen will appear in the series Supergirl portrayed by Mehcad Brooks as a photographer for Catco and is also a love interest for Kara. Animation, Jack Grimes reprised his role as Jimmy Olsen in The New Adventures of Superman. In the Super Friends animated series, he appears in the 2nd episode of the world's greatest Super Friends season, Lex Luthor Strikes Back, with Lois Lane. It wasn't Jimmy at all, but Lex Luthor's henchman Orville Gump in disguise. Mark L. Taylor played Jimmy Olsen in the 1988 animated adaptation of Superman. In Superman, the animated series, Jimmy was played by voice actor David Kaufman. One episode was called Superman's Pal as an homage to the classic comic series, and Superman gave Jimmy the signal watch by the end of the episode. Another allusion to the comics made in the show was seen in the 2nd season episode Mx's Pixelated, where Mr. MXYZPTLK turns all the employees of the Daily Planet into animals. Jimmy is turned into a turtle, possibly as a homage. In Justice League, Jimmy makes a brief appearance in Superman's Nightmare in Only a Dream, with David Kaufman reprising the role. He makes a cameo at Superman's funeral in Hereafter. a photographer with orange hair appears beside Clark at the beginning of Star-Crossed. Though his face isn't shown, it is likely Jimmy. Jimmy had several cameo appearances in Justice League Unlimited, including one episode where Huntress used sleeping gas on him, tied him up, taped his mouth shut, and used the signal watch to attract Superman. In the episode Chaos at the Earth's Core, several heroes battle a giant turtle that has a thatch of red hair. Bruce Timm has confirmed this is a reference to Jimmy's giant turtle boy persona, but it was more economical time-wise to have him revert to cute little turtle than naked, confused photographer. Jimmy appeared in the season 5 premiere of The Batman played by voice actor Jack DeSena. He and Dick Grayson have a back-and-forth discussion about Batman and Superman from their sides of view. While Jimmy favors Superman to Batman, he is still impressed by Batman's Batmobile. Jimmy appears in The Batman, The Brave and the Bold episode Battle of the Superheroes, voiced by Alexander Polinsky. The episode references him with his misadventures of him being transformed into a giant turtle, and having quills thanks to MXYZPTLK. Jimmy appears in the Young Justice episode Depths. Jimmy appears in the Tales of Metropolis segment of DC Nation Shorts, voiced by Alicia Yaff. Film Jimmy Olsen appeared in the Superman animated short film Showdown, where he is voiced by actor Jack Mercer. The first actor to portray Jimmy Olsen in a live-action format was Tommy Bond, who co-starred with Kirk Allen and Noel Neill in the film serial Superman and Atom Man vs. Superman. In the full motion picture starring Christopher Reeve, beginning with Superman, the movie, Jimmy Olsen was portrayed by Mark McClure. McClure reprised his role as Jimmy Olsen in the 1984 spin-off movie Supergirl, making McClure the only actor and Olsen the only character to appear in all 5 Superman films of the 1978 to 1987 era. In Bryan Singer's 2006 movie Superman Returns, Jimmy Olsen is portrayed by Sam Huntington, an older and more confident, yet goofier portrayal of the character who finds it difficult to get a good shot or get any photos published. In a deleted scene included in the DVD release, a slightly inebriated Olsen is seen to complain to Clark about the fact he has not had a photo printed in several months. In the film, Jack Larson, who portrayed Jimmy in the Adventures of Superman television series, plays Bo, a bartender who talks to Clark and Jimmy. Singer originally offered Shawn Ashmore the role, but the actor declined due to his commitments to X-Men: The Last Stand. Ashmore's twin brother Aaron Ashmore played Jimmy in Smallville. Jimmy Olsen did not appear in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel film. Some sources had suggested that the film would recast the character as a woman named Jenny Olsen. Actress Rebecca Buller instead portrayed a character named Jenny Jerweach. Jimmy appeared in Superman, Doomsday, played by voice actor Adam Wally. He is with Lois reporting the battle between Superman and Doomsday and is one the characters followed through their grieving process. He's been quitting the Daily Planet and becoming a paparazzi photographer. Lois tries to get him to come back and help her investigate Superman's supposed return, which he refuses due to him foolishly liking his new life. He does eventually help Lois after seeing Toyman dead by Superman's hand, and they discover that this Superman is a clone made by Lex Luthor and later runs alongside Lois during Superman's fight with, who Jimmy calls, Rocker Superman, the real Superman. After their fight, Jimmy is happy to see the real Superman alive when Superman confirms it is him through a kiss with Lois. Jimmy appeared in Justice League: The New Frontier. He has no dialogue, therefore no voice actor. He is always shown with Lois, and is almost killed during the final battle. He tries to take dangerous pictures during the battle. Jimmy is played again by David Kaufman in the movie Superman: Brainiac Attacks. Jimmy appeared in Justice League: Crisis on Two Earths. He is in the Antimatter Earth as Ultraman's pal, and was used to bait him out. He tries to take on Luthor and Superman with superpowers in battle. This Jimmy Olsen has the powers of flight, superhuman strength and durability, but despite them, he was easily overpowered by Superman. He was arrested and taken to jail along with Ultraman. In promotional materials for the film, this version of Jimmy is referred to as Mr. Action. He was voiced by Richard Green, Jimmy appears in the movie All-Star Superman voiced by Matthew Gray Gubler. Jimmy appears in Justice League, Doom, with David Kaufman reprising his role from the Superman animated series. He has a brief speaking role as he and Lois are outside the Daily Planet reporting a possible suicide jump. Jimmy is the one who identifies the jumper as a former reporter from the Daily Planet. It is really Metallo in disguise, who proceeds to shoot Superman with a kryptonite bullet. He appears in Superman vs. The Elite voiced again by David Kaufman. In Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Jimmy is mentioned in a news segment where he announces that the fourth year of the TV writers' strike won't interfere with this year's television season. Jimmy appears in Superman, Unbound voiced by Alexander Gould. He doesn't have a major role in the film and is present mainly as one of the cameo characters in the film. He does serve a brief purpose as Lois asks him to use his signal watch to call Supergirl, who he immediately has an attraction to. He also appears in Justice League, Throne of Atlantis. Though he was a non-speaking role, his voice was credited by Patrick Cavanaugh. An alternate universe version of Jimmy Olsen appeared in Justice League, Gods and Monsters, voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. He was part of Lois Lane's reporter team and snuck into the morgue of the deceased scientists to get some pictures before getting arrested. Jimmy Olsen will appear in 2016's Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice portrayed by Scoot McNairy. Video games in Superman 64 he is trapped, along with Lois Lane and Professor Emil Hamilton, by Lex Luthor. Superman has to save him and his friends in this game. In Superman, Shadow of Apocalypse for the Nintendo GameCube and the PlayStation 2, Jimmy makes some minor appearances and only seen in the story between gameplay. He is seen in the bibliography section of the game. In DC Universe Online Jimmy appears as a supporting character for the Heroes, voiced by Brandon Young. Cultural references: the Spin Doctors had a minor hit with their song Jimmy Olsen's Blues on their album Pocket Full of Kryptonite, in which they portrayed Jimmy Olsen as infatuated with Lois Lane and jealous of Superman, a problem which he hoped to solve with the aforementioned Pocket Full of Kryptonite. In the period after the song became popular, artist John Bogdanov, who at the time was the regular penciler on the Superman, the Man of Steel comic, would occasionally depict Jimmy wearing a Spin Doctors t-shirt. References. External links: Jimmy Olsen at Mike's Amazing World of Comics, Transgender Graphics and Fiction Archive. An overview of Jimmy Olsen's adventures disguised as a woman. Jimmy Olsen on DC Database, an external wiki, a DC Comics wiki.